right now we've got Philip Singleton on the phone. Philip is a candidate in the 3rd District congressional race, which is an open seat. And we welcome you to the program, Philip. How are you?
Thanks, Martha. Good. How are you?
Good.
Although
So tell
I think my time as a chief of staff up in D.C. is probably as relevant to this conversation as anything.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about you first, and then we'll get into this discussion.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm a child of Fayette County, Peachtree City. Grew up down here in Fayette County. Married my high school sweetheart and was at Georgia State. Wanted to be pre-med when 9/11 happened, and like I'm sure a lot of your followers were like. 9/11 was a canon event for us, and so I felt compelled to join the Army after the Bush speech in the rubble. And so on September 20th, I joined the Army and ended up as a mechanized infantry guy serving out of Winder, Georgia. And then when I graduated college, I commissioned active duty into the Army and went to flight school and became an Apache pilot and got stationed. My first duty assignment was to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, 101st Airborne Division. And did 3 deployments back to back, 1 to Iraq and 2 to Afghanistan as an Apache pilot out of Fort Campbell. Then served, through my field grade time as a major overseas and training NATO forces in Germany, and then my last 2 years in Korea as the Brigade XO for 2nd Cab, the largest aviation brigade in the world, and came back to Georgia in 2017. My wife and our 4 kids, and started flying for the airlines, and just kind of felt compelled to keep serving. I felt like my service wasn't done, and ran for State House and had the unfortunate pleasure of running against a former congressman's daughter and having to fight the establishment through the race, and then got up to Atlanta. I won that race handedly, 60-40, and got up to Atlanta and quickly discovered that there was a whole lot of people that claimed to be Republicans and ran on things like school choice and limited government. And I wrote a Save Rural Sports bill in 2019. I got the most, over 60 co-sponsors to the legislation, and we couldn't move it at all because the Republicans just didn't have any desire to do what they said they'd do on the campaign trail. And so fought that for a couple of years. In 2021, launched the State Freedom Caucus Network to try to be the conscience of the party and, try to explain to voters that there's a big difference between the way people were running their campaigns and the way they were legislating once they got into office. And the speaker at the time didn't like that very much, so he drew me out of my district when the census gave them the ability they couldn't beat me at the ballot box, so they drew me out. And then my good friend, Marine helicopter pilot and ER doctor Rich McCormick said, well, forget those guys, come be my chief of staff in Washington, we'll keep fighting them together. And so starting in January last year, I became his chief of staff, and the last year I've been up in Washington as a chief of staff, fighting with my good friend, Dr. McCormick. And then when Drew Ferguson, my congressman, announced that he was retiring in December right before Christmas, Julie and I just prayed about it and said, maybe this is another door for God opening the door for me to keep fighting for limited government and liberty. And we prayed about it and decided to run for the seat. And so now I'm running for the open seat in Georgia 3rd to keep serving the people in my county.
There are 2 things. There's so many problems, but I think 2 are kind of at the top for me. One is the budget and the budget process, because we are not passing. I ran for Congress 12 years ago, and the same things that we put in what I called my map for prosperity are the same problems we got today. Okay. So, and they're worse than they were. So my concern, 1 is the budget, but 2 is all of these foreign entanglements. And I don't mean that in a bad or a negative way. I mean that there is a place for us in the world, but how do we manage that? So just your thoughts on those 2 topics.
Well, of course, in typical Martha fashion, you pick the easiest ones to talk about.
Well, Ryan very well. Ryan Mahoney is my best friend. So anyway.
I do. Well, Ryan breaks stuff down really simply, so it's always fun talking with him. Okay, let's talk about the debt first. Can we break them in half?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So you're 100% right. I don't have a smart saying like you did. That was a really I like the way you did that. But debt is huge, and the budget process is huge. Right now we're spending over $7 trillion a year, and we're only raising $5 trillion from a federal government's perspective. So, completely unsustainable debt. Our debt servicing is over $1 trillion. Over $1 trillion this year for the first time ever. So, We're less than a decade from the federal government's revenue not being sufficient enough to cover debt servicing, much less actually fund and run the government. So that's a ticking time bomb. But you're right. There is no budget process in Washington right now. It's a total joke the way we talk about it, because the budget process is different from the appropriations and the authorizations process, and most people don't even understand the difference between the three. But we're supposed to be passing 12 appropriations bills. We're supposed to be on timelines. We haven't gotten the president's budget yet for fiscal year 2025. All these things they're so broken that what we keep ending up is CRs. And a CR is just, especially because we're doing CRs based off of hyperinflated COVID spending. We're not even going back to 2021 levels pre-COVID. And so these CRs are just terrible. They're just, liberal wish lists of just trillions of dollars. And then we get stuck with buses, and I always joke that I don't like minibuses or omnibuses or any buses. So, the buses are bad because what they do is they'll clump a couple appropriations bills together and they'll sell them as a package. And so they get members to, well, I like this thing and I don't like that thing, but I'll support it because it has this thing I like. And that's just a really bad way to do business. To your point earlier, we need to be separating everything, individual votes on individual bills.
And then just your thoughts from your experience, and we're going to have to continue this conversation. I want to do a more extended discussion with you because I think it warrants it, and I think the people from the 3rd District should hear it. But I wanted to ask you about not just Ukraine, but just your general thoughts about when should we fund things from your experience, because you've got the experience to help with those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard conversation, Martha, because you can't have any of them in a vacuum, right? You can't sit there and talk about, the $117 billion that the Democrats sent to Ukraine in the 117th Congress, and then compare that to the $300 million that the Republicans sent for oversight and IGs and investigations so far in the NDAA in the 118th Congress. And people like to conflate them, but it's because they don't understand the differences. Besides, obviously, the massive difference in the sum of money. But then you got other people that want to say, well, we need to secure our southern border. Well, of course we do. But you'll get the you can't walk and chew gum argument at the same time. I'm a big advocate, and it's something that I've talked with, Dr. McCormick has fought for too. We have a piece of legislation called Make Putin Pay. And essentially it bridges the gap between the two arguments, because right now the federal government, the United States and our allies have seized $330 billion of Vladimir Putin's money internationally. We seized it over a year and a half ago. So let's take that money and pay back the $117 billion to the American taxpayers, and then use the rest of that money to give the military aid that Ukraine needs. And that's not a single dollar from the American taxpayer. Let's make Putin pay for his illegal war in Ukraine.
So, Philip Singleton, we're going to have you on again for a more extended period of time. I'll get with Ryan about that. I'd love to do just like a really in-depth discussion with you. And I think it's important that we do that. If people, though, want to help you now, how can they do that?
They need to go to singletonforcongress.com, or they can follow me on Facebook or Twitter. I'm all over the place, but singletonforcongress.com, go and make a donation. Look, you have a chance. You have a chance to have a limited government conservative that knows how to stand up and stand up against leadership when they're doing bad things, but also know how to get things done. So, there's lots of. I joke that a lot of Republicans campaign like Spartacus and legislate like Lumiere. There's got to be strategy involved. The way we move the needle forward as a limited government conservative is we don't go out and we don't attack other Republicans. We attack bad policy, not people.
Absolutely.
And then we build relationships with people, and we attack bad policy, and then we go and we have a strategic plan to achieve victories in those policy areas, which is something Dr. McCormick and I have done together, working together in D.C. And that's why he's so effective, is that we're able to, Martha, I know you got to go, but the second you start talking about your strategic victories and what you're doing behind the scenes to make a difference and change things, you highlight your strategy to the enemy. And make no mistake, there is an enemy out there that wants to grow government and limit the ability of individual choice in this country. And when you highlight what you're doing, that, you may get publicity and you may get on Fox News more, but you're not going to achieve your objectives.
Philip Singleton.
We need to have people. Yeah.
Philip Singleton, I appreciate you being with us very much, and we're going to keep talking with you in the future. Good luck on your campaign.